I'm a rabbit.
I fucking love pancakes.
Titty bar.
Fluffed up and side on.
There's no P in the G.
Sexy. I've made you a chili. Get your dick out.
Wanted.
I quite enjoy it.
What? Are you fucking crazy?
I think you just took it too far.
Oh my god! That's so wanted. Hello, and welcome to Swipe Match Marry, the modern relationship and dating podcast.
I'm James.
I'm Marny.
And I'm Steve.
Join us as we explore love, life and dating in the modern world.
Has the internet ruined dating?
How do you find and define your sexuality?
Do we have to adapt to find love?
We're going to be discussing all of this and more as we attempt to unlock the code of dating culture.
Let's get into the show.
Hello, welcome to Swipe Match Marry. How is everyone?
Great.
Good. We've got a very special guest this week. It's a bit of an unusual episode for us. We're out of the SMM towers and we are at the house of, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello everybody, I'm Eliza.
Hello. And we've got Marny and Steve here, of
Hello.
course.
Hello.
We're taking the mick out of James, weren't we?
I know.
No, we still, one day we'll perfect the intros.
Yeah, we'll get them right one
And
day.
then no one will listen because they're used to us being normal.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a special episode this week. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I'm Eliza and I'm a full service sex worker, and for those of you that don't know the parlance, that means that I am what is traditionally known as a prostitute or an escort. It basically means that I fuck people for money.
Right.
Sure.
There it is.
And there we go, and that's the start of the
Well,
episode.
your Audi will fit in very well with us because we are very frank, and it sounds like you're very frank as well,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah, and we like swearing.
We
So can you elaborate a little bit more on that and tell us exactly what you do?
So I have been working for the last couple of years. I sort of came to this job reasonably late on in my life and my career, and I do a lot of kink related work, so a lot of stuff that's to do with BDSM, and I'm hoping you're...
Can I just stop you right there?
Yes.
What does that mean? What is BDSM? Should I know that? Do you know that?
That's half an hour, isn't it?
Oh dear. To be fair, I don't actually know the definition either.
Okay, so it's like the kind of modern way of explaining S&M, sadism, masochism. So BDSM
Okay.
stands for bondage, domination,
Right.
sadism and masochism, but also, okay, it's
All
a little
the
bit more
things.
complex than
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
But
So that's the generic term for that kind of thing.
yes,
Great.
or kink,
kink.
whatever you want to call it.
So kinky stuff.
King.
Yes.
Cool.
So I do that. I also do straight escorting, which these days is more commonly called GFE or girlfriend experience, which is kind of just a more sensual experience with kissing, holding hands, straight sex. And I do a lot of PSE, which stands for porn star experience, which is anybody who's watched porn knows that really the predominant sort of trope in porn is quite rough and violent towards the woman, and it involves a lot of very sort of quite oral sex that you wouldn't... Not many people have that level of oral sex in their personal lives. But I do a lot of that. It's
Right.
extremely, extremely popular. I mean, it's like my bread and butter.
I'm sure.
And yeah, it can be quite sort of quite rough, basically. So I do quite a lot of that.
And do you think that being your most popular thing, is that just because people are so used to... They identify with that as sex these days, do you think?
So I was working as a sociologist and I was doing research with sex workers, and when I went on dates, a really common thing was the minute I said, oh, I'm doing research into guys that have sex with sex workers, every single guy who I was on the date with, and I mean like 9 out of 10, said, oh yeah, I have. Or I do regularly.
Really?
Yeah, and it just makes you think, fucking hell, this is a lot more common than we think, and it made me realise that a lot of guys do not... It's extremely sort of covert for them. There aren't many arenas that guys can admit to that in. They can't admit it with their mates unless like they're on a stag in Prague and they're all going to a brothel. But if they're coming to see somebody every week on the quiet, they won't talk about it to their mates.
Yeah, they're not going to go down the football and talk about it.
No, they can't talk about it to their partners. And it's something that is just a lot more commonplace than we think. So
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of my clients say 90% of them, 95% of them are married or in long-term relationships. And I think that there is definitely something to do with you come to see a sex worker to purchase an experience. It's like going to a sexual theme park that you would not get at home.
Yeah.
And so many guys say to me, I really fucking love deep throat, my girlfriend can't do it.
Right.
And I get that over and over again.
Uh-huh.
And more recently I've done some porn acting as well, which
Right.
is great for me because it's kind of showcases my skills, so it's free publicity. And again, it really is great for business because guys like the idea that they're fucking somebody that they've seen
Of course, yeah.
On the actual TV.
online or whatever, yeah.
Wow. And do you think that guys don't actually want their wives or girlfriends to be able to do that? They want to separate it?
I think that's a really good question, and I think I'm a former sociologist, and I think that you're going to get into the whole like Madonna whore sort of thing. And yes, I think and this is really a peril actually when it comes to dating. I think there's a massive separation between seeing the sex worker as the dirty whore, and you know, in my sessions I get a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of dirty talk, some sort of, you know, mild violence, and that is certainly not something that people would feel comfortable doing with their partners.
So it's almost like they've got to get it out of their system with somebody else maybe, and they're kind of paying for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a privilege that they're buying, isn't it? It's kind of, I think a lot of us accept that we might watch big movies but we can't go to Hollywood, but I think that sometimes some guys see something and they think, okay, well, if that's within my grasp, then I want to
try it
have
out.
a slice of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. So one of the main reasons why we came to speak to you today is with the work that you do, how do you find dating working alongside the industry that you work in? Is it something that you find quite hard? Is it something that comes quite naturally?
It's a minefield to be negotiated. Before I started sex work, I hadn't dated for a long time anyway. And in some ways doing sex work is actually like a great physical release for me, so I don't feel as much the need to fuck other people because I get a lot of that in day-to-day life. But the main issue with I think what people's preconceptions is that jealousy will be the issue. I think that is what people think, is that, oh my God, I couldn't ever go out with somebody who fucks other people for money because I'd be so jealous. But in actual fact, that isn't the initial problem. The initial problem is that they tend to fetishise you as a sex worker. Because if you think about dating somebody, you meet them on OkCupid or whatever, and I mean, OkCupid is a format that a lot of sex workers a platform that a lot of sex workers use because there are questions that you can answer that show whether or not you are amenable to sex workers,
right,
so you can weed out people who are anti from the beginning.
Right, that's interesting.
What was that? OkCupid.
Yes.
So is that like a eHarmony website? I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a free dating website and or app. And it's much more in depth than like Tinder or whatever. So people can give a lot of information about themselves, and you can like weed out people who want the right to bear arms or Trump supporters or whatever. You can
detailed.
It is. So it's used by a lot of trans people, a lot of sex workers, a lot of gay people, a lot of polyamorous people. So it's a very good platform for people who are in alternative sort of sexuality spheres.
Oh wow.
So supposing I met somebody on OkCupid, their first issue with me, I tend to sort of say quite soon, like in our messaging, that I'm a sex worker, because I think I'm not really asked about expending a lot more energy if you're not interested. And the first response is generally positive, because if you think about when you're just chatting to somebody online, you're not emotionally invested enough in them to be jealous.
Yeah.
That's true. And I also think if you really fancy someone and you want to meet them, you kind of say anything, don't you, in a way? Like, you agree to stuff.
Big time. And how many guys, this sounds really, really big-headed, but in their heart of hearts, how many guys don't want the chance to fuck a porn star?
Well, no, it's not big-headed at all. I think that's
true.
just a fact of life, isn't it?
And I think there is an element of that you actually, you're sort of capital
Yeah.
in that world
Want to tick that box,
increases
maybe.
because of your job. The problem really with dating comes further down the line when emotions get involved and people realise the realities of, oh, actually, if you've been fucking all day, then if you think about using your body for work, like an athlete or whatever, you can get quite physically tired out. Your vagina might get sore.
Yeah, you just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. You might have had a really rough couple of hours where you've taken a lot of, you've taken a real physical pounding, and it's pretty hard to then go into a session with your partner. There's also the separation of the psychological side and the kind of romantic side with your partner. Because sex work is extremely performative. So my friend described it as an actor, that you're hiring a one-on-one actor to pay for a performance, and it's exactly like that. And
I never really thought about it like that before, actually.
If you're good,
right.
if you're good, then the client won't know that. Hopefully they can make a bit of a distinction that you're a professional, but if you're really great, they come away having had the best experience ever, and quite often your clients will ask you out because they think that you're the perfect woman because they've just paid you to act as the perfect woman for an hour. And like, anybody can keep that facade up for an hour, but you haven't seen me in my pyjamas, mate. It's not real. It's not real.
Yeah.
I like what you said about being a theme park. I think that puts it in perspective. It's not real. It's sort of a made up world. You walk around Disney and it looks how it's meant to look, because that's what you're paying for. You're paying for that experience, and so people are leaving you and thinking that that's real because you're obviously very good at your job, so they want a bit of that all the time.
Yeah.
So are you actively dating now?
I went on a date last week, and I may be going on another one soon, but I don't date a lot. I mean, I have to say that I'm a feminist, and I think that makes it hard to date men.
I went through that phase, believe me. I went through a phase of just hating men.
Yeah.
Because I'd kind of witnessed it. I'd worked on, everyone knows that I work in theatre, so I'd worked on a few shows where I'd openly seen people having affairs. I've got a couple of family members that have been through horrible tragedies with regards to people cheating on them, and it just felt really rife, and I was like, I don't even trust any men, and I went through a real man-hating phase. And I guess doing what you do, you must really feel that as well, especially if you've just mentioned that a huge portion of your clients are married.
They're married, yeah.
So it makes you feel quite jaded towards the sanctity of marriage, I guess.
Well, I mean, a lot of my colleagues are polyamorous because they actually reject monogamy as a sort of state of affairs, and I think that's great, and I can completely understand that. And personally, I'm not that hung up on fidelity. But it does challenge your preconceptions about marriage, or I don't know what I sort of call like the Disney happy ever after bullshit.
Bollocks.
Yeah, bullshit. Yes. You're about to get married. You shouldn't say that.
No, that's true, and we do have a lovely romantic ideal of marriage, and I have a great relationship. I'm very lucky to have it. But yeah, anyone that thinks that relationships walks off into the sunshine, they take work. Relationships take work. Not every day is a breeze.
That's right.
It's an agreement, and it's obviously there should be more good times than bad. Otherwise, get out. But yeah, no. I mean, it's bollocks, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, do you feel that monogamy is old-fashioned nowadays?
I've always thought that monogamy is a nice ideal, but I mean, I've been married twice, but I wouldn't be devastated if my partner cheated on me, because I think that it's just a fact of life, and I think that we should be a lot more pragmatic than we are. And I think that, as a sex worker, I know that my presence and that the presence of my colleagues, guys come to see sex workers to preserve their relationships because they value their relationships. And when you come to see somebody and you pay them a sum of money for an hour or for a specified duration of time, it's kept in its box. It's not like having an affair with somebody at the office.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not an emotional relationship.
No, it's not.
No.
It's not, and it's specific, really. You know, the guys don't want it to be an emotional relationship.
Yeah. So we've spoken about something before, but my stepfather had an affair, but he had an emotional affair. So he didn't have sex with this woman.
Oh, okay.
But they were together.
Right.
And he wouldn't have sex with her until he was divorced from my mother, and I found that so strange, so different, because it's just not the normal way that affairs go. But it was he needed an emotional connection of someone else, but it wasn't a physical one.
But there's still a betrayal, isn't there?
Absolutely, which is something that he found very difficult to understand, because everyone around him was saying, no, you're having an affair, and he was like, no, I'm not, because we haven't had sex. And it's like, well, no, you have. In fact, it's almost worse, because it's not as you say, like a small fix or something that's a purely physical thing. It's actually an emotional thing, and that's a harder thing to sort of clear. And so that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it was a long time ago. It's now he's a knob.
He's consigned to the dustbin of knob.
Oh, he sure is. Yeah, but no, it is very. It's interesting to me the emotional and physical thing, and how they can be split up. And
yeah, so my job is like the flip side of that, isn't it? It's like, I suppose if my clients' wives found out, they could at least console themselves with the fact that it's just physical, and they absolutely haven't. You know, these guys have no interest in me as a. I mean, they're not inhuman. They don't dislike me as a human being, but they don't have any feelings for me.
It fits a purpose. It fits what they need.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's something that, again, you have to sort of really convey to a new potential partner. These guys don't have any feelings for me. I have no feelings for them. And because we've all been brought up in this sort of sex equals love thing, I think that sometimes guys really struggle. They think that if you're a woman, you must feel an emotional connection to somebody that you have sex with. I think that's absolute bullshit. It's just it's a physical act. It sounds awful if I say it's mechanical, but it's just physical.
Yeah.
I think overexposure to porn as well is quite damaging. It gives people a warped idea of what meaningful sex between a partner is, because it's not like porn. It's making love is different. It's not like that. I mean, I'm sure it can be, and if you're into that kind of thing, but I think there is a difference. And if you're going home and watching porn every night, then you've got a different idea. So when you actually have sex with your wife or whoever, it's not like you're watching. It's a different thing, and I think people must find that quite difficult to separate in their head.
Well, it's an unattainable ideal, isn't it? Yeah. It's like me as an ordinary shaped woman looking at Scarlett Johansson or whatever, or looking at women with thigh gaps, and it's all a very polished and fake and unrealistic thing. But I mean, I suppose as somebody that is quite enmeshed in the kink scene, I would kind of disagree with you that it's not legitimate, because I think that for a lot of people who I know who are into sort of subdom relationships, you know, that might not be the classic idea of making love to people, but it works for them. And I know people who have had very, very long standing and healthy sexual relationships well into their sort of 60s and 70s by having subdom or BDSM type relationships, when, you know, your kind of archetypal monogamous marriages have long since sort of moved into separate rooms. So
absolutely, yeah, separate beds, separate rooms, someone sitting on the sofa. Yeah, for sure. So I just want to revisit, because you started talking to us about you dating, and then, you know, at first guys are like, oh, this is excellent, you know, I'm really okay with this, and then when do you find if there is, or when is there a shift into, I'm not okay with this? So I guess the first element that I find difficult is having to educate them in sex worker politics and the law and the reality of doing sex work, because it's a very, very secretive industry. Nobody knows about it, so you have to educate everyone you know who isn't a sex worker, so it can get pretty tedious. So when you're entering a romantic relationship and you're having to start really from, you know, the basics about okay, so sex work in the UK is legal, but so I'm not breaking any laws.
I pay taxes, and then often people laugh because they think, "Oh, you can't pay taxes, you're a prostitute."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, tell the HMRC that.
Yeah. And what is that? Is that just sort of the media sort of putting things across wrongly?
No, it's because the sex work in the UK is criminalised, which means that the purchase of sex between consenting adults is legal, but a lot of the ways in which you might buy and sell are criminal, are illegal.
Okay.
So it's illegal for a woman to stand on the street and solicit.
Okay.
Right.
It's illegal for a guy to drive past and curb crawl them and ask somebody for business. It's illegal for somebody to keep a brothel, which is classed as more than one woman working in one place.
Okay.
And there are various other slightly more complex laws around it, but it's completely legal. So if you avoid, and nowadays with the internet,
That's what
nobody
I was gonna
needs to
ask
stand
you.
on the street.
Yeah,
of course.
has the internet kind of changed the way that sex work is done? I guess it makes it
Massively.
easier.
And also, I think that the difference has been that as indoor workers, we are suddenly able to make ourselves heard because, you know, we're able to have Facebook groups, we're all on Twitter, we form massive communities, you know, you're just able to connect in ways that indoor workers wouldn't have been able to in the past. They would have stuck cards in phone boxes.
Yeah, sure. Or stood on the street and touted for business because they didn't have another choice, and that's what is illegal.
Yes, that's right.
It's a minefield, isn't it, actually?
Yeah.
So what happens when you've chatted to a guy, you've been on a date with a guy, you've
Yeah.
explained all the stuff that you have to explain all the
Yeah.
time, and what kind of reactions do you get? Is it sometimes good, sometimes bad? How does it normally pan out?
I think that people are afraid of saying the wrong thing and asking the wrong question
Okay.
because I guess I am quite touchy about it because it's like a highly politicised subject. It's something that I care about a lot, and I get very annoyed if people make kind of sweeping statements or assumptions about it. So I had a really negative or strange reaction from somebody when I told them that I work from home. They were like, you could just mentally hear them reorganising their thoughts around it.
Right.
They were like, oh, it's all right if she does that, but oh my God, surely not, like, in the place that I'm going to go.
Right,
I
okay.
see, because there's
Yeah.
no distinction between work and home life. Is that what they think?
I think it's a bit more insidious than that. I think it's, so we have a term that we call whorephobia, which is
Right.
like the kind of entrenched fear of and sort of hatred towards people who work in the sex industry. And I think it's basically this idea that selling sex is dirty.
Right.
So I think, like, there's a hierarchy of, you know, sex work, sort of street workers being seen as the most dirty, indoor sex workers next most respectable, porn stars more respectable still, then you've got your page 3 girls, you know, and gradually it becomes
It's
like,
so funny, isn't it? Because you get, you know, like page 3 girls, and then stuck in the Big Brother house, getting paid loads of money, and
That's right,
and they're
yeah.
celebrities, and like, why is that? Like, what's the distinction? I find it's just sort of double standards of media and people in modern days. It just doesn't make any sense, really.
yeah, it is a big double standard. You know, we're all selling sexual services, and so again in the kink community there's a big sort of stigma to do with people who do full service, which i.e. you fuck people, whereas some dominatrices don't have penetrative sex with their clients, but they're still fucking them up the arse with a strap on.
Sure.
Yeah. or sitting on their faces.
So that's okay, but penetrative sex is
but
not okay.
they'll say that they're not providing sexual services.
But they are.
I think that is.
Well, ultimately, it's
Yeah.
you are still selling sex, because if the end result is somebody getting a happy ending, then let's face it, you're a sex worker.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people who are struggling to come out to say to their parents as sex work and might well sugar the pill by saying I'm working as a dominatrix. Because
Okay, because that seems to be more acceptable.
yes, because we have the idea of a dominatrix as somebody wielding power and keeping on their black latex catsuit or whatever sort of trope you've got in mind, you know. So you can imagine when you meet a new guy, you have to explain these things to him. And I had a bit of a negative reaction recently so I was meeting this guy for a date, and he was going to be a bit late, like 20 minutes late. or half an hour, not very much, but I was really pissed off because in the way I'd worked my schedule for that day, I could have seen another client.
Sure.
And I don't see many clients a week. I probably see 4 clients a week, but 1 extra hour for me is an extra couple of £100.
Yeah.
So that's a big proportion of my income.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really cross that he didn't respect me as a self-employed worker, didn't respect my time, but also when I mentioned to him what my issue was, he said, well, that seems like a really quick turnaround. And I felt really stigmatised, like he was making out like I was some kind of fucking factory.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're self-employed, I don't know,
Well, I'm self-employed.
if
Right.
anything, that anybody
Yeah.
that produces anything,
Yeah, time is money. Literally.
time is money, and you want
Yeah.
to churn as many of those fuckers out as you
And
can,
also
so long as your standards don't slip.
The time you actually getting paid for, there's preparation that goes into that as well. It's not just that
massively
time.
so. I mean, people are quite disappointed to know that kind of 75% of sex work is admin and marketing.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I've spent so much time maintaining my website, getting new photos done,
Yeah.
really tedious things like getting my nails done or going to the gym or whatever, but
Yeah, you just don't think about that, do you? Well, I've never thought about that really, but you're right, because you've got to... Well, like going back to the kind of one-on-one performance thing that you talked about, you've got to maintain that physically as well as kind of
you've got to be
outwardly.
attractive. If your
Yeah.
pictures don't match up to the person that person meets,
Yeah.
then,
Exactly.
you know, they're not going to come back and see
It's
you.
like any actor, like headshots and
Yeah.
like going
it's-
to class and all that kind of stuff.
I know,
it all
and
comes
we've-
into your...
That's true. Like, we've talked about this before, like when you, that kind of, there's a term for it and I can't think what the term is, but it's basically when you look at someone's online dating profile and you think you're meeting 6'2"
Yeah.
Terence, who's, you know, got a full head of hair.
Terence?
I don't really know.
In the past.
Right, 6'2" Dave,
Yeah, fine.
and you know he's got a full head of hair and he looks like he's 31 in his profile, and then he turns up and he's actually like super fat and bald
Yeah,
and
yeah.
41 because his photos from 10 years ago. It's an absolute thing. It's a kind of like catfishing, I guess, in a way, but you're just kind of presenting an untrue version of
Yeah.
yourself. Like, you can't do that either. You have to be the person that your client's seen on the website.
Quite.
So you've got to maintain that.
That's right, and that brings me on to another kind of issue with dating, is that the guy who you're dating or sort of talking about dating inevitably asks to see your sex work profile.
Right.
And that is, from my perspective, a complete no-no, because there's a lot of sexually explicit pictures on there, so you're immediately asking to have access to something which either people pay for or if we were in a relationship would take a bit of time for me to get to. I'm not public property. Just because I do this commercially doesn't mean that anybody is able to look at it. But also the way in which my profile or my website sells me is very much as a sort of compliant, sexually available sexual being, because that is how you get your clients interested in you.
Yeah.
But that isn't my reality to my boyfriend or potential boyfriend. It's, you know, I do sit around in pyjamas all day watching Come Dine With Me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't sit there panting with my legs apart on the bed, gagging for it. And I have to trust somebody before I have to trust them to know that they will understand that distinction.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to be a goer.
It's an absolute job, and 40 hours a week really is less than 2 days, and it's a job. But there's a lot of other time within that where, you know, like you said, watching Come Down With Me on the couch, and you know, people that you date have to identify with that person and treat the job as a separate entity.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, I mean, there's a lot to me. Like, I'm really into the arts, I like going to the theatre, like, I like gardening.
Yeah.
That is just non-sexy.
Yeah.
And you've got to get to like that person.
Yeah. And I guess, do your clients not want to know about that side of you, or do you not allow them to know that side of you?
I mean, actually, they do. And I do, lots and lots of workers don't ever share that kind of level of personal information, but I do, because I kind of sell myself as quite authentic, and sometimes I do give them like a real life selfie, like a no makeup selfie, or me just holding the cat instead of me pouting with my tits out sort of thing.
Sorry, you've got a cat?
Yes.
I'm absolutely obsessed with cats.
I don't know where she is. I thought she'd be
well,
on the
Marny's
way.
heavily allergic, so it's fine.
Oh, I meant to warn you in case somebody was allergic.
But our listeners, I have to deal with my cat meowing in the background and then Marny sneezing on most episodes.
Although I'm not sneezy today,
No,
so...
because this place is a lot cleaner and nicer than mine. That's why. Sorry, I got excited about cats. Please carry on.
So yeah, that is something that I'm quite happy to share with my clients, but for a lot of workers, that side of things is something they like to keep separate.
So with dating, we've mentioned a few things that haven't gone well and people that haven't responded too well to what you do. What's the sort of the goal? You've mentioned you've been married a couple of times. Do you see yourself as married again, or do you just miss that person in your life that's separate to what you do, and just someone to spend the rest of the time with?
Well, I have had a longish term relationship since I've been a sex worker, and that's really been like the only one that I've had. And I suppose what I set apart as different from him is that he was just immediately very able to see me for the real me, sort of thing, and so I wouldn't rule out being in a relationship again if somebody like that came along. But I think that the difficulty with makes me sound really old if I say modern dating, but the difficulty with sort of meeting people online is that you're always setting out from a sort of baseline when all the like gripes that I've just laid out to you have to start from the beginning with every fucking one. And I just feel like I can't be arsed. I mean, one of the nice things about sex work is that it makes you financially independent. And so I don't need that. I've got lots of good mates, and like I said, I get the sex from work. Obviously not all of it is fab orgasmic sex, but some of it is, some of it's nice hot sex with hot guys. And so it does really make you a bit more reticent to sort of go into a relationship, I suppose.
Do you think it takes a certain type of man to be able to deal with the fact that you are a sex worker?
I don't know about a certain type. I guess I would say that I think to be a sex worker you have to be quite pragmatic, and I think that probably the guy that got with me would be quite pragmatic as well, because so I suppose in that respect you're right, Marny, definitely. Yeah.
And one question I always like to ask, it's not really related to sex work, is do you think that our current obsession with social media, things like Facebook and Instagram, and kind of publicising our lives makes dating harder? And the fact that everything is app-based and online-based? Because you just sort of mentioned about being a bit older and just kind of like the world of online dating is just a minefield.
It is. I mean, I've dated online basically since online dating was conceived, and I have never ever had one relationship off it.
Right.
And I mean, I'm talking like not quite hundreds of dates, but pushing hundreds of dates. And maybe that means that I'm undateable, but I think it's more likely that I find this tick list mentality that we can set out from the beginning and try and choose a lot of things that we supposedly want. They can be really dismissive of other really valuable sort of traits that other people have.
I totally agree.
You might not actually see until you meet somebody. And when I said that, I'd have one relationship, that was somebody who I met through one of my sort of going to gigs, sort of networks.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with online dating.
I find the whole thing fascinating. Not having dated for quite a while, but it just seems like the app-based culture and online, and exactly like you said, tick lists, and it's giving people sort of a bizarre shopping list. And then how on earth when you meet someone are they gonna live up to whatever you've ticked in a box? Like it just doesn't. It seems really sort of far back from the more organic approach.
Yeah, it's unorganic, and it's the very British thing of putting people in pigeonholes. Yeah. And people don't fit in pigeonholes.
No, they don't. And also we've spoken about how odd and how nice it is that when someone just approaches you. Like I know Steve recently mentioned about someone that has approached you, and that felt like a very a strange thing because
Yeah.
people don't do that, but people used to do that all the time. It's it's strange how it's evolved, but that's really interesting to say about or to hear about the dates you've been on coming from online and they haven't led to a relationship. And I don't think that's just you at all. I think that's pretty much everyone that's dated online.
I've never had a relationship from dating someone.
No, and I'd be surprised if many people have.
I did, and it was fucking toxic.
Was it? We talked about that before.
Not really. I met him on My Single Friend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which was really, really popular. I don't know if My Single
Loads of
Friend
people-
is it still popular now?
I don't know, but loads of people have really recommended it as not like all the other ones because it's a bit more nuanced and...
It is, and the main gripe with people having to do online dating is filling in the application form and having to sell yourself. Most people find that really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And the good thing about My Single Friend is that your mate does it for
mate
you,
does it,
and you don't have to say anything. You get a little chance at the bottom to say, oh yeah, I agree, or just to add. But your friend sells you, which is kind of great because that's sort of maybe what happens in real life, where it's, you go on a date with someone because their mate set you up. So yeah, I really like the format of it, and I've certainly put single friends on it as well. Maybe we should get Steve on it. We should get you on it. But I did end up going out with someone for about 18 months on that, and it was actually, in hindsight,
He was a dick.
It was not a good a good relationship.
But you could have met a dick anywhere.
I could have met a dick
there's
anywhere.
a lot of them.
Exactly. And I think part of the reason that we started the podcast in the first place was out of frustration towards the dating scene, and particularly in London. Like, we've all had our struggles with it, haven't we? Like, and I know for a fact that I would not have met my current boyfriend online. There's just no way.
No, and it really, when we started the podcast, it struck us as being this really strange thing that no one was really talking about. Everyone was just sort of transitioned into online dating and apps and this sort of really alien way of communicating, and no one was actually going, what? Like, this is weird.
This is shit.
This is really shit. Have you met anyone? Have you met anyone? No, I haven't. Obviously, there's occasions where you have, but
also what it breeds is people just sitting alone at home and then actually being really disincentivised to physically go and have the date, because you could always stay in on Tinder and find somebody new.
Oh,
and somebody...
it's the grass is always greener.
Yeah, big time.
It's the attention. I remember breaking up from a long-term relationship, and I didn't have the confidence to... I don't have the confidence as a strong person to go out and talk to a girl at a bar. Like, we've discussed this before, but to just say hi to someone completely random and get some attention, it was really good. It was really good for that, but I've now got the knowledge that, for me personally, these kind of apps mean nothing more than maybe just the odd bit of attention every now and again. Definitely.
Oh gosh, it's all gone a bit macabre.
well, you know how we can get it back up.
depressing.
We can get it back up to our normal standard. So we normally start on a sex position, but we didn't this week. So volunteers, who's got a funny one? Who's got something that sounds strange?
I've got one that I had never heard of until yesterday.
Oh, good. Go for it.
So one of my colleagues was moaning on an online forum about how difficult she finds riding cowgirl, and somebody else mentioned that a really good way, because if you're a sex worker, then obviously time is money, and so you want the guy to come, and a really good way to get the guy to blow his load quite quickly is Asian cowgirl, and I was like, the fuck's that? And I thought,
Asian cowgirl.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? What do you reckon?
Asian.
I don't even know if I know what cowgirl
I'm
is.
really worried that I'm going to go down some kind of weird racist slope.
Yeah.
I think on this occasion we might just need to not guess, and for you to just tell us.
Okay, so it's quite simple. So instead of just like girl on top, it's like, can you imagine deep squatting but onto somebody's cock? So you have your you have your feet on but next to his hips.
Yeah.
And instead of like you being on your knees next to his hips and fucking him.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
You're doing deep squats. Well, I don't want this to become popular because my thighs cannot take it.
Sounds exhausting.
How can you do
Yeah,
that?
a couple of squats and I'm done. I hope he
Yeah,
does
that's,
become
you've got to
quicker.
have some real core
Lord.
strength there. And I can just say that I did work in Asia for a week, and it is really common that they'd sit on the floor like that.
I thought you were going to say
true.
something else then.
Oh, I thought.
Can I
thought
just
it was
say-
something else.
What did you think?
Well,
I was
that's how they
gonna
go
say?
to the loo.
That is how they go to the toilet.
Oh, is it?
Oh.
Maybe that's why it's
That's
called.
why.
That's why it's called it.
There you go.
Ah.
Fine.
Great.
Well, I'm glad we're sorted. Any dating stories?
I don't have one. You've got one.
So, I had a friend, and she was on a date, and she's currently doing a master's degree.
Oh.
And they'd had a few dates, and it just turned sour very, very quickly because she was telling him about the course and everything like that, and the guy just turned around and said, "Do you know what? That's really cute, but it's actually a waste of time, considering that you'll probably just end up sitting at home popping out kids."
What? I'd kick him in the balls. What an idiot.
God,
And she was
that's
distraught.
so antiquated.
I hope she told him to piss off.
She left.
Yeah, good.
He
She
needs
left.
a certain type of woman if that's what he thinks
Yeah.
modern relationship is.
He needs to listen to this
Please
podcast.
listen
Doesn't
to
he
the
just?
podcast. Again,
Well, Eliza,
education.
thank you so much for taking the time to talk to
Thank
us.
you
It's
very
been
much.
fascinating and just so great to speak to somebody
been
as
awesome.
eloquent as you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's been
thank
really
you.
wonderful.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yay! Round of applause!
Thank you for listening to Swipe Match Marry. Remember to subscribe using your podcast app so you don't miss out on any future episodes.
And why not write us a review? It's quick, easy, and helps us improve our ranking in the iTunes store. If there's anything you want us to cover, send us a tweet at Swipe Match Marry.
As always, we hope that next swipe leads to a match, and maybe even a lifetime of happiness.